The man suddenly discovered something terrible. 2 civilians were obviously trying to escape from here, but he ran out and was shot. The man immediately felt that something was wrong. Who knew that the employer, Lao Bai, would directly give him a gem worth $1 million. Then he told him directly, 70 seconds. Until this moment, the man was in a panic. It turned out that Lao Bai tricked him to the border of Myanmar. It turned out to be the goal of becoming a group of rich people hunting and killing. The other party obviously moved the real one. At this time, he had no room to retreat. In the end, the man had no choice but to escape into the dense forest. As expected, when time comes, these rich people became enthusiastic and set off. However, they never thought that the rules of hunting and killing would change from then on. The man's name is Nick. He used to be a well-known comprehensive boxing athlete, but now he is in danger. Soon he found a corpse on a small river. Obviously, it was the victim of the last wave of hunting. However, when he saw such a situation, Nick didn't seem particularly confused. Instead, he calmly walked to the river to drink some water, but then an accident happened. Fortunately, a gun did not hit Nick, and the other party saw the first gun in place, and then shot him, but the man still failed. Nick quickly locked the other party's position through the gunshot. Seeing the other party rush to his side in a hurry, so Nick quietly sneaked into the water and hid. Soon, Mao Zinan arrived at the river, but found that Nick's figure had disappeared, but he looked around. Nick suddenly pulled a gun into the water. Then Nick returned to the base. He hit Mao Zinan in the head and fainted. The sword hit Mao Zinan, and he begged for mercy, and Nick was softened by the sword and stopped. The opportunity for the other party to counterattack when Nick noticed, but it was too late. This time, Mao Zinan also took out the dagger with him. Then he launched another attack on Nick, but he underestimated the other party's strength because of the light enemy. He soon became the victim of the sword. This blow made Mao Zinan's head hit the stone heavily. It looks like it's impossible to survive, and Nick left the scene without a sound after completing everything. Old White will take people here soon. At this time, everyone was shocked to find that Mao Zinan was dead, and this is when they played hunting games. The first time a hunter was killed. However, these bloodsuckers, it's not because of this failure. Instead, it aroused their interest and desire. At the same time, Nick has run away. He began to regret why he agreed to Old White's invitation. Nick used to be a professional fighter, but in a key match, he killed his best friend, although he won the championship. But this accident has always been a barrier to his heart. In the end, he chose to retire from his professional career. From then on, he became depressed. But in order to maintain his life, he occasionally participated in some underground boxing matches. This day, Nick was invited to a match. He gained the victory of the match with his years of experience and skillful fighting skills. Of course, the Old White under the stage looked at it all. After the match, he took the initiative to find Nick. He proposed to let him participate in a special wrestling tournament, and claimed that there were top players from all over the world. The prize money is also very generous. When he got the invitation, Nick was shocked, because he always wanted to pay the friend who was killed by himself, so Nick finally agreed. But Nick didn't expect. Old White is actually a real hunter and killer, and his real purpose, it's to satisfy the needs of the rich to make a profit. In order to achieve this goal, he even bought a local officer from the Burmese military. However, when Nick realized that he had been deceived, it's too late. The only thing he can do now is to escape as soon as possible, to a place about 70 kilometers away. Maybe there's still a chance of survival. Although he was lucky to escape in the first hunt, he thought it was not difficult to hide in this vast forest. But I don't know why. Old White took the rich to track down his whereabouts when Nick found danger. After all, the hunters had targeted him with weapons. Nick jumped into the river in a hurry. He will use a big rock in the water as a cover. Soon, the rich began to attack him, but all the arrows fired were successfully shot by Nick. The arrows were not effective. One of the rich hit the gun, but still failed to hit the target. Nick once thought he was finally out of the chase, but I didn't expect the rich to fire another grenade. The explosion hit Nick all over the hill. He kept rolling and rolling for about 500 meters, finally hit a soft thing and stopped. Nick looked up. He found that he was a big elephant, just when he didn't know what was wrong. A woman suddenly walked out from the side. He was first comforted by the frightened elephant, then asked Nick why he wanted to disturb their rest. Nick saw that he didn't seem to be Old White. He opened his mouth and told him that he was being hunted by a group of rich people. Hearing this, the woman immediately understood Nick's situation, because his brother had the same problem a few days ago. Now his brother is still alive and well. At this time, Nick hurried to the border, so he said goodbye to the other side and prepared to leave. Who knew he was called by the woman when he turned around? When he saw that some locals were willing to help point the road, Nick quickly followed up. At the same time, the other side of the Old White, because of the failure of the 2 kills, to get angry. So he dropped a few motor vehicles directly from the main camp. It even includes a large drone. It seems that Nick's situation has become more dangerous, because the Old White captured his trace again. But Nick didn't know all this. With the help of the woman, Nick has gradually approached the borderline, only about 10 kilometers away from the danger zone. However, at this critical moment, suddenly 3 motorcycles appeared in front of them. These people are trying to trick Nick and the others with their equipment, but when they really started attacking, but underestimated Nick's strength, he flew into the air and quickly knocked the 2 of them down. At this time, the rest of the female rich man drove over to Nick. Nick unhurriedly pushed the woman away. Then Nick hurriedly fell on the ground. A motorcycle quickly rode up and accelerated to the far side. However, how could the woman rich man let him go? He picked up 2 shotguns and shot Nick madly. The bullet has no target in his life. The woman rich man fired a grenade immediately. The moment Nick's back was ignited, the explosion was 2 times stronger. Fortunately, Nick still managed to dodge it, not long after they came to a stop. This time, Nick decided not to run away, but to take the initiative to fight. A complete victory for the other side. The woman rich man was also excited after being provoked. He stepped on the door and rushed to Nick, but he didn't expect it to be Nick's trap. However, the woman rich man quickly stood up again, as an heir to a big oil bank. He has never been so humiliated. At this moment, the woman rich man wanted to stab Nick 100 times. Of course, Nick was not familiar with him. The 2 sides fought fiercely. The weapon was blown, but it didn't do any harm to Nick. Then the 2 of them started fighting. However, the woman rich man seemed to forget. Nick used to be a professional international player, although he does have a few real skills. But in front of the profession, this kung fu is very powerful. But Nick didn't choose to kill him. Instead, he turned around and rode a motorcycle to see if it was safe for the woman. However, he didn't know. The woman on the other side has been targeted by a father. The father saw the woman's figure from a distance. He got off the motorcycle and picked up the weapon. A little excited to get close, they seem to have found a new target. I feel very proud, especially when the target is a girl who seems to be weak. It's more carefree. But they didn't expect it. The woman is not the soft persimmon they imagined. In the face of the father and son of the weapon, not only did they not run away, instead they took the initiative to attack and hit the bow and arrow in their hands all at once. However, in the next fight, the older man took the opportunity to grab the woman's hand and quickly stole the knife from her hand. The situation suddenly became a crisis. Then the scene was completely suppressed. The woman was beaten without any respite. Then the old rich man seemed to have a more excessive idea. This made the little rich man on the other side look at him. He could only turn around and leave. No matter how the old rich man shouted, he didn't even stop at this moment. The woman suddenly launched a counterattack, pressing hard on the old rich man's eyes, pushed him down on the ground, then picked up the knife on the ground. Of course, the little rich man was unharmed by this when Nick came back. The old rich man had long been caught by the woman. Nick pulled the woman away from the scene. Not long after, the old white man found the old rich man's body. Angry, he grabbed the little rich man with one hand. But it's too late to do anything now. This is the little handsome guy's idea of retreating. But the other people in the team are not going to quit. However, it is their decision. I didn't expect to pay a more painful price in the near future. At this time, Nick has returned to his home with the woman. At the same time, the wound on his shoulder was treated. The 2 of them finally enjoyed a moment of uneasiness, but I didn't expect the old white man to lock up their position again. So the old white man immediately continued to chase after the target. Just before the old white man got there, Nick and the woman had already set off again, go toward the edge of the river. Now they can reach their destination as long as they pass through the last forest. However, in the process of running, Nick suddenly noticed something was wrong. They seemed to have entered a minefield. Just when the two were about to return, the old white man also chased here. The sword hit Nick and immediately let the woman leave, and he chose to stay and prepare to kill the old white man directly. However, Nick's bow and arrow missed the target. At the same time, this arrow also exposed his specific location. Then the old white man started to attack Nick. At this moment, the old white man suddenly began to act. He realized that Nick was already in the minefield. Then these people changed to the 16-round rifle. However, the little rich man wanted to avenge his father. He was impulsive and didn't care to persuade the group to rush up directly. But his reckless shooting did not cause any danger. Instead, Nick grabbed the actual arrow and shot it in the body. Then the shotgun in his hand fell to the ground, accidentally triggered the earthquake. The violent explosion covered the old white man with the smoke. This gave Nick and the woman a chance to escape. After leaving the dangerous area, Nick let the woman go first, because he was their target. However, the woman refused the suggestion. Instead, he told Nick that he knew a more hidden place. There, he could temporarily avoid the chase of the old white man. So he followed the woman to a cave where he could hide. After running for a whole day, they can finally rest for a while, but what they didn't expect was that the woman found her brother in the cave. It turned out that he was hiding again to avoid the chase, but because they were deep in the cave, the old white man suddenly lost his place in the chase. Out of nowhere, the old white man had to order his men to settle down, waiting for the signal to reappear after a night of rest. Nick woke up and found that the woman and her brother had disappeared. What surprised him even more was that his gem had disappeared. He immediately realized that his brother had stolen his gem, so he hurried to the border to chase. As expected, he hadn't gone far. I found that they had been caught by the old white man, so Nick quietly approached these people, unintentionally found a fallen man filming a video. Then he secretly touched the other hand of the other person and pressed this person to the old white man. Although the old white man didn't care about the life and death of the hostage, but he knew that if he lost the hostage in this situation, his business and reputation would be seriously affected. Under the balance, the old white man had to choose to compromise and release the hostage. Soon, the two brothers and sisters came to Nick's back. According to his instructions, they left here quickly, but after the two brothers and sisters walked away, Nick decisively handed over the boy in his hands. Almost at the same time, the two sides began to fight fiercely, because the battle took place on the railway. The space is narrow and the action is dangerous. The old white man's people can't accurately hit Nick at one time. In the end, Nick grabbed the opportunity and jumped off the bridge. He successfully escaped from the scene again. At the same time, the woman and her brother had not run far enough. He was stopped by the rich woman. When he saw the situation, the woman decisively pushed the brother down the cliff, and he calmly walked away with the rich woman. The rich woman saw the woman empty-handed and put down the bow and arrow, because he felt unwilling to use weapons to bully a man with no body. Then, the two sides began to fight instantly. Facing the battle of life and death, they were merciless. Although the rich woman took advantage of the emergency, but he didn't expect. A fatal mistake is about to happen. The woman confirmed that the other party would not dare to stop at any time. Soon, he found his brother in the river, and Nick, who waited again for a long time. The three men caught up and went down. In the process, the woman returned the stolen jewelry to Nick. At the same time, the old white man also got the news that the rich woman was killed. He didn't expect to experience such a loss after years of hunting, so he made up his mind to stop the prey from escaping successfully. Because there is only one way across the border, so the old white will never let them get there smoothly. Just as expected, when the three men of Nick just got to the river, the old white took the rest of the rich man and chased him over. Nick was confused as to why their whereabouts were always precisely controlled by the other party. Then he quickly turned over the jewelry bag. As expected, he found a locator hidden inside. After finding the problem, Nick made a plan. Nick asked Zhao Mei to take the jewelry directly to the border, and he chose to stay and solve the old white. Then he quietly sneaked into the camp. Then he broke open a gas can with a hammer, with a lot of gas coming out. He came to the gas tank next to the parking lot, quickly fainted a soldier, and found a signal bomb in a wooden box. After completing these, he drove away. A huge roar immediately attracted the attention of the old white. They rushed to the shore. At the same time, Nick ignited the gas can with a signal bomb. A violent explosion was instantly triggered, but unfortunately, this explosion did not hurt the old white and his companions. However, Nick ran away immediately, but but he didn't wait for him to run far. 2 couriers followed him. They are all armed border soldiers. At the same time, the Old White also became a helicopter to follow. The retreat of Nick was completely sealed. All the pursuers in an instant were facing Nick, although the border was already in front of them. But because the other party's firepower was too strong, he couldn't get through at all. At this time, he could only rely on the mobility of the courier to continue chasing the soldiers, but obviously he also became a target. In the end, he had no choice but to risk his life. However, he was stopped by the border soldiers as soon as he ran out. Fortunately, Nick was in good hands. A face hid the gun from the other party. The soldiers who came up in a hurry fired a counterattack. In just a few seconds, he put all the guards here. Next, Nick had to go through this bridge. You can completely get rid of the danger of chasing soldiers, but he didn't expect. The Old White actually drove a helicopter to block his way. Nick quickly hid his sword, and the Old White saw that he didn't show up, and he caught a resident and shot him. And what he did was to force Nick to show up. Look at another boy walking up the bridge. Nick really couldn't bear to see more people being hurt. He finally stood up with his teeth pulled out. Obviously, the Old White would not help Nick easily. Instead, he wanted to use this opportunity to slowly torture him. So, the Old White randomly sent out 5 killers. On the surface, it was to give Nick the last chance to fight. In fact, he wanted to watch a good show. Nick, who had no choice but to fight head-on. The battle between the 2 sides was over again. The Old White sat aside and watched with interest. But what made him so anxious? These 5 people were not Nick's opponents at all. They all fell to the ground in just about a minute. This is aside of Fu Hao's choice to make his own move. He thought after the fight just now. Nick must have been exhausted and powerless to defend himself. But after a few rounds, he found himself completely underestimating the other party's strength. He soon lost the battle. He was even easily caught by Nick. The Old White shot and killed Nick immediately, but he never thought. Nick used Fu Hao's body to block the bullets. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Nick rushed towards him. The gun in the hand of the Old White was kicked. The situation turned 180 degrees in an instant. The Old White was hit 4 times in a flash. Nick finally relieved his anger. He picked up the gun on the ground, coldly looking at the Old White. But he didn't just pull the trigger. Instead, he gave the Old White 2 minutes to escape. However, the Old White, who thought he had no chance, but unexpectedly waited for the general he had bribed, with a group of soldiers to arrive. The situation turned 360 degrees again. However, when Nick was almost headless, the woman who had already succeeded in crossing the line, he turned back. He handed Nick the gem he had kept, directly to the general. I didn't expect this huge wealth to change the general's attitude. Just when Nick and the woman were about to leave, the Old White took advantage of the general's handgun. Then he wanted to kill Nick, but he didn't expect it. He was hit by the soldiers behind him. It's all over. The woman then took out a few gems and handed them to Nick. It turns out that he had already quietly left a mark for the 2 at the end of the film. Nick and the woman had a happy life. Thank you for your support. This is a movie of pleasure. Our next good-looking movie is Not on the Road.